Right now on the Daily Debrief, closing arguments in the case of a Florida man accused of murdering his pregnant ex-girlfriend.
He was shooting over and over again at her to try to kill her.
The defense says the victim's family lied on the stand.
You want the community to authorize a needle in his arm?
The defendant fights with the judge after the jury deliberates his fate.
You are not to address the audience.
He's saying, run.
Do not talk over me. Stop.
Also, a shouting match at a Fort Worth, Texas City Council meeting after a white police officer shoots and kills a black woman through her bedroom window. And
Jimmy the Hammer.
Objections over a nickname for a defendant who prosecutors say killed a doctor with a hammer. The Daily Debrief brings you the day in court. It's Wednesday, October 16th.
Good to see you this evening here on the Debrief. Closing arguments in the case of a Florida man who admits he shot and killed his pregnant ex-girlfriend. Markeith Loyd is the defendant who admits pulling the trigger and killing 24-year-old Sade Dixon. Her brother, Ronald Stewart, was shot and injured while on the run. Loyd shot and killed a police officer, but most of the details of that case are for a separate trial. Loyd got off the witness stand to describe pulling the trigger. He said the whole thing started when he argued with the victim about smoking pot while pregnant. He says she pulled a gun on him and that he fired in self-defense because he considered it either his life or hers. Gigi Gonzalez, Mike Koribanics, and Kenney Baden are with me to watch this testimony tonight. Let's start with the state's closing argument. The state says there was no threat and that testimony indicates this was premeditated murder.
Sade Dixon was disarmed prior to any shooting and prior to Ronald Stewart coming outside. She wasn't a threat. Defendant was told to leave several times before any shooting, but he didn't. He pursued Sade Dixon as she ran away towards the house, trying to get away from him. Defendant pointed the gun at Ronald Stewart and he cocked it, loaded around into the chamber. They were both retreating and attempting to avoid this confrontation and get into the house at the time of the shooting. Sade Dixon was shot 8 times. The number of shots and the number of injuries inflicted on Sade Dixon is evidence that this murder was committed with a premeditated intent. The number of shots fired show that the defendant wasn't there to protect himself. He wasn't trying to wound her or scare her or teach her a lesson. He was shooting over and over again at her to try to kill her.
The state talked about Ronald Stewart, Sade Dixon's brother, who was also shot but survived and took the stand. It's his version of events the state relied upon to build its case.
Ronald Stewart was also shot, as we talked about, while he was down on the ground. He is unarmed. He's shot once already. He's down on the ground, and the defendant advances upon him, stands over him, and shoots him in the chest. The defendant then turns his attention to Sade Dixon, and then turns his attention back to Ronald Stewart and shoots him standing right over him. That final shot was shot at almost point-blank range directly at Ronald Stewart's heart. That is an intent to kill. That is purposeful aiming to a vital organ, pulling the trigger, intending to kill. You heard the judge read an instruction on some of these charges that deal with heat of passion. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, heat of passion does not apply in this case. The only conceivable evidence of heat of passion comes from the defendant's version of events, where he says Ronald Stewart attacked him. And I submit to you that the defendant's version of events is inconsistent with the physical evidence, with other testimony, and with logic.
Markeith Loyd's defense attorney recapped Loyd's testimony, complained about the prosecutor's tactics, and raised the issue of race.
Mr. Loyd took the stand. He told us a lot of stuff that he didn't have to. A lot of stuff that probably rubbed you the wrong way. He masturbates. His relationship with women. Whether you believe he's controlling or not controlling. His statement, 3 or 4 questions into Mr. Ridgway's cross-examination. So you're the victim, Mr. Loyd. You were innocent when you went to jail. Folks, you know, this is not a colorblind courtroom. Look at him. This man's black. And we know in our community that there is a difference. I'm not playing a race card here, folks. I'm telling you the absolute truth.
The defense accused the victim's family again of lying on the stand. We're going to listen to that part now. Here's where they discuss who dropped the F-bomb after the shooting.
And I'm sorry, you lost your daughter. But do you make up stuff because you want to kill this man? Because you want the community to authorize a needle in his arm? Is that what you want? So you try to explain what the Why is what the important? It's important because that's what that man said when he was attacked by Ron.
Loyd's attorneys claim he didn't turn himself in after the shooting because he was worried about the police lying to the press about what really happened. The defense, however, slipped up and said the defendant was guilty. Whoops. The mistake led to a later apology.
And then we get to the point where he's finding out that they're lying on him. And he starts believing that the police want to kill him. Now, why is that important? Why is his state of mind about the police important? Because he wanted to turn himself in, and he offered to turn himself in, and Savelli even admitted this in talking to LaKentia, but he didn't turn himself in because they wouldn't get the press to tell the truth about what really happened. I believe my client's guilty of everything, but I am most interested in sending you home at the end of your deliberations, because if you find him not guilty of the first-degree murder charges, you're done. And I got a note from my co-counsel who said that I said he was guilty. If that's what I said, that's not what I meant. It's not guilty on all the counts.
After the judge sent the jury off to deliberate, the defendant himself went off on what many could consider to be a rant to complain about his attorney's performance. Here is just some of that.
I want the jury to know that Ron, he's shot, he's supposed to be out of commission, whatever, but he can account for everything that happened. Because he can't, he made it, he made that stuff up. How you on the ground, out of it, but you can tell everything that happened.
Right, so you wanted them to argue that he made things up. What else did you want them to argue?
And then I also wanted him to show that Ron said, I shot Sade because she wanted to walk in the house. I'm not finna shoot because she want to walk in. She got my child.
Mr. Loyd, you are not to address the audience.
He's saying, Ron,
Do not talk over me. Stop.
Everybody is here now to talk about what we just heard. Linda, Kenney, Baden. Look, that's the client you begged to represent. I know you wish you had this case.
Well, let me tell you, on direct, he did a good job for himself. I think he is crazy as a loon in the sense that he believes everything. He believes that people are against him. He believes that everyone's in danger and therefore he could shoot anybody. But his attorney, Aaron, did him a disservice by the way he represented him in that closing, by attacking. He should have just said, look, he believes everything. Did you think that he didn't believe it? And then your job is to discuss credibility. But I think the way his attorney went around it, I would fire my attorney too.
Gigi Gonzalez, what do you make of that slip up where he said, oh, my client's guilty, and then had to go back? It was quite some time later and then say, oh, I'm sorry, jury, I didn't mean that.
That was a tough mistake to make because now this is your last opportunity to address the jury. And that statement, I believe my client is guilty of everything, is just sitting there marinating. You're not even really thinking about anything else because that's just so blaring. The defense attorney saying that he believes his own client is guilty of everything. How do you take into account anything else he says after that? It's a bad move.
Look, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes sometimes, but this is a big mistake. Mike Koribanics, I think that you're perfect, though I know you'd never make this kind of mistake. What do you make of the 8 shots? The prosecutor's saying, look, 8 shots that aim, all of these things add up to premeditation. There I made a mistake. I know Mike wouldn't have made it. Mike, does that make sense for the prosecution's case in trying to prove premeditation?
I think it's always a strong argument for the prosecution. I think they did a good job with that. And also, you always have a problem when the crime's committed somewhere other than where your client lives at somebody else's house. So I think they made a very good argument.
Linda, the judge is saying that the jury can stay at it until 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. The jury's saying they're making progress. What do we make of that? Could we have a verdict tonight?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, they had two very interesting questions. They wanted more simple definitions, and they want to know how one count related to felony murder. So I think they are making progress, and it may indicate that they're already past some of the other counts, some of the original counts on the murder.
Gigi Gonzalez, should the judge have listened to that so-called rant that we heard from the defendant, or did the judge do her best job and just kind of say, okay, I've heard your complaints, I don't agree with them, let's move on?
It's her duty to control the courtroom and to make sure that everything is moving along smoothly. And these types of outbursts, they're not helpful for the defendant, and they're not helpful for the court proceedings. So it was good for her to put a rein on it.
That's what I think as well. Let's move on now. A heated city council meeting in Fort Worth, Texas, after a white police officer shot and killed a black woman, Tatiana Jefferson, after a neighbor called for police to check on Ms. Jefferson because her door was open. The mayor attempted to keep the meeting on point, but struggled.
I will remind you that according to the rules, you must speak on the topic that you signed up for.
I'm here to say that Fort Worth is not safe today.
Jeffrey, you must stick with the topic, and I just read the topic again.
Okay.
If you don't speak on the topic, you'll need to sit down.
I have 2 minutes and 26 seconds left.
To speak on the topic.
I listened to NPR this morning, and you were interviewed.
Which is not the topic.
Well,
Marshals.
I think what we need is for you to acknowledge that this is a systemic racism issue. Thank you very much.
Until black and brown lives are protected from this
Dominique,
police
again,
department.
I will remind you, you must speak about the text
until black
of
and
the
brown
agenda
lives
item.
are protected in this city, and that we talk about systemic racism in this city or whatever, we don't need to talk about nothing foreign related.
If you do not intend to speak on the subject, you don't need to come forward because you will be asked to sit down. There are many people who've come to express their opinion tonight that we want to hear, but we must get through our business before we get to citizens' presentations.
I'm speaking on the Gulf States Regional Law Enforcement Tech Assistance Initiative, which I believe directly relates to the police department, and so do my requests and what I have to say.
Natalie, it must be related to this contract.
If you were awarded the $150,000, would any of that money go to maybe retraining officers on how to not pull triggers? I don't feel safe in Fort Worth, and neither do any of my community.
We have a motion.
And you guys are not willing to address that. You want me to stop. You want to silence me and shut me down. And I'm not okay with that. My wife's not okay with that. My kids are not okay with that. I'm a member of this community, born and raised. Stop 6 raised. And for you to look at me and try to get these officers, whom I don't feel safe right now because they're pretty close to me right now.
But you're not speaking on the tax funding.
We don't feel safe. We don't feel safe. We don't feel safe.
Mary, call the next one.
When the floor finally was opened up there, those who waited their turn to speak were livid about those optics.
I want y'all to get it, because I don't think you get it, because what tells me you didn't get it is because, for one, this agenda that we had here tonight could have been pushed off to another day, because your city is hurting. Your city is in pain. Your city is right now struggling, and you want to carry out a long agenda. And what got me so much is that you filibustered through the whole agenda. Because after we had a long, drawn-out conversation, and you come back and you continue to talk about the same thing. And then, Carlos, you talk about an issue that had no opposition. You keep talking about it. So here we are, and we're wondering, do you really get it? Do you really get it that we want accountability? Because there's no way in the world an officer who is trained is held to a lower standard than a civilian. If we go and kill somebody the same way, we're going to go to jail, and we're going to be put in jail for life.
Protesters even shouted down the mayor when she tried to close that meeting in honor of the shooting victim after having met with the victim's family.
As a mother, as a grandmother, my heart was touched today from her family. She loved her fur babies. She had a dog named Olive. She loved playing Halo. I'd like to close tonight's meeting because her siblings asked me to do this to honor them tonight. They expected us to respect them. So I will close tonight's meeting in honor of Tatiana Jefferson.
Cameras provide the best transparency. Still ahead tonight on The Debrief, the family of a missing Connecticut woman feared dead lashes back at the tactics of the defense attorney for the ex-husband charged in connection with that case. Plus, testimony from the ex-girlfriend of a Florida murder defendant. She claims he confessed to helping 2 other men kill a doctor. The family of a missing Connecticut woman, now feared dead, says it's ridiculous for her estranged husband to think she went to the doctor about 2 months after she disappeared. Fotis Doulos is accused of disposing of evidence in the disappearance of Jennifer Doulos. His attorneys are seeking access to her medical records because of a bill dated about 2 months after Jennifer Doulos disappeared. Her family is now saying the bill was a regular recurring fee which was automatically charged every 3 months and has absolutely nothing to do with in-person services. And now to another day of testimony in the case of a Florida doctor beaten to death with a hammer. A friend discovered the body of Dr. Teresa Sievers after she did not show up to work. The hammer authorities say was used to kill her was near her body. Nothing, including money, in her home had been taken. Police think her husband asked for help to kill her. Investigators say that husband, Mark Sievers, hired his friend Curtis Wright and Wright's friend Jimmy Rogers to commit the crime. Rogers is the one on trial right now. Wright cut a deal and will testify against Rogers. Sievers himself faces a separate trial at a later date. Investigators say Rogers and Wright bought a suspicious mix of merchandise from a Fort Myers, Florida Walmart the day before that victim was murdered.
I saw them near the cashier. I could see their feet area, but I could not see the items being rung up. But yes, I saw them by the cashier being checked out.
As you followed the men around the store in the digital video system, did you see what departments they went to?
Yes, sir. I could tell certain areas of the Walmart, just being familiar with Walmart, was what areas they were in.
And did you locate some of the items that the 2 men were shopping for?
I located several items. There was a backpack. There was a T-shirt. There were garbage bags. There were wet wipes. There were men's shoes, work shoes. There was a tool kit, screwdriver, lock set. There were a couple items that were on the list that were no longer in stock or we were unable to locate.
The defendant's ex-girlfriend testified that he allegedly confessed to her one night.
I remember me bringing it up, saying that I knew that he had something to do with it, and he agreed with me. And I asked him if he killed her, and he said yeah. And then I asked him if he shot her with a gun, and he said no. And then I asked him how, and he said with a hammer.
Did that scare you?
Yeah.
Did he talk to you about how much money he hoped to make from the trip to Florida?
Yes.
And what did he say he hoped to make from the trip to Florida?
$10,000.
And did he tell you who was going to pay him that $10,000?
Not that I remember.
Here's what's bizarre. At one point, detectives were apparently paying this ex-girlfriend $400 a month. On cross-examination, Rogers' attorneys questioned her about inconsistent statements that she had made to the police.
I do recall that he hoped to make $10,000. Is that your correct statement?
Yes.
At another time, do you recall saying that he was going to make money from selling antiques?
Yes.
Do you recall in another statement talking to the police, you said you didn't know why he was leaving? Is that right?
At that time, my head was all messed up. Everything was happening so fast, and at that time, I did not remember that.
Let's bring Mike, Linda, and Gigi in for their thoughts on this case. So, Gigi, when you have a witness on the stand who's basically saying the defendant confessed to me, and then she says my head was all messed up, the original accusation is very, very damaging. But then she gave the defense the perfect line to basically attack her credibility back.
Oh, definitely. And this was she's a very helpless, meager witness. So the defense had to be very careful with her. With that said, her testimony was still very powerful because the cell phone evidence that's going to be presented is going to corroborate what she says here. So even though her head's a little bit foggy, more or less, we're going to be able to see if her word is bond.
All right, Mike Koribanics, I'll ask your thoughts on this. We've got these items purchased at the Walmart. We're saying that they're suspicious. So by themselves, they might not be. When you start adding up the evidence, though, that's where the suspicion comes in.
Well, absolutely. I mean, everything's a building block in this case, and I think that's going to really hurt them, is the shoes especially, because those are things you can get rid of.
And Linda, Kenney, Baden, your overall thought with this? It's been a little bit of evidence here and there as we move along in this case. You know, we've got the Walmart items, we've got this alleged confession, we have other things starting to add up. It's been a circumstantial case built brick by brick, as we say.
Yeah, and Aaron, the thing about it is Mark Sievers, who's not on trial yet, but he's in the box, has the motive, right? Curtis Wright has pleaded guilty. So if you have this witness, who is the girlfriend of the person now on trial, she corroborates what Curtis Wright is going to say. So that's why they're willing to pay her $400 plus $400 plus $400. By the way, she's a little bit savvy because she did call and ask for the money. They didn't initially volunteer it.
Yeah, I mean, does the money really make it easy to sort of say, hey, look, she had too many strings attached with this and therefore she's not credible?
I think on a normal case it would have, but there's too much other evidence here, in my opinion, as a defense attorney, that corroborates that her boyfriend, the father of her child, was also guilty. Mike, overall thoughts on this case? Where does it go? We have another couple of days of testimony going along. The defense says it's got a lot of witnesses. They're going to take 2 days to put a case on. What do you make from here on out?
I think this case is going to be very difficult. This young lady was a devastating witness, and the cross-examination fell very flat.
So overall strong for the state?
Very strong.
We're going to move along now because it's time to wrap up the debrief. We appreciate the insight from the panel, and thanks a lot to those of you who are watching along with us. A reminder that our live trial coverage resumes tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern Time right here on the Law and Crime Network. The debrief, of course, back at 5 o'clock Eastern. We'll see you then.